Hello, friends. Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling expeditions to Greenland ever recorded. A journey that sparked a chain of tragic events like a deadly domino effect. We'll unpack the harrowing tale of Ludvig Milius-Erichsen's venture, but before I get into the heart of it, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel and drop a like right now. Go ahead, hit that like button, and let's jump straight into this gripping story. We'll start from the beginning, as always, to build the full picture. Ludvig Milius-Erichsen came into the world on January 15, 1872, in the Danish town of Viborg. As a kid, he had a real passion for poetry, which earned him plenty of teasing from his schoolmates. But he didn't let that stop him. He kept scribbling verses anyway. After scraping through school with some effort, he headed to Copenhagen University, where he juggled studies with a gig as a journalist at the newspaper Politiken. It was there that a few of his short stories and poems saw the light of day. In 1898, he published a play called Tate, which even got staged at the Folk Theatre. That same year, he tied the knot and continued churning out poetry and short tales, mostly painting vivid pictures of Denmark's natural landscapes. He was this dreamy, romantic guy from the heathlands of Jutland, spending most of his days chatting with fishermen and farmers, gathering inspiration for his future works. But then, a pivotal encounter flipped his life upside down. He met Knud Rasmussen, and nothing was ever the same. In 1900, Milius-Erichsen was heading up a student group that organized little trips and adventures for fellow students. Knud Rasmussen had just joined the student community but couldn't afford to tag along on these outings. However, he landed a job as a journalist for a newspaper that sent him with the students as their correspondent. During those trips, Erichsen and Rasmussen hit it off and became fast friends. Knud shared captivating stories about his beloved Greenland, pulling Erichsen into a world far removed from Denmark's gentle countryside. Knud Rasmussen had grown up in Greenland, where his father served as a missionary. The boy spent most of his time among the Inuit people, playing with Eskimo kids and speaking their language as fluently as Danish. Back then, in Jakobshavn where he lived, there were only 3 Danish families around. From a young age, he mastered dog sledding, kayaking, and handling weapons. One of his closest playmates was an Inuit boy named Jorgen Bronlund, the son of a local hunter. In 1891, the Rasmussen family moved back to Denmark, and Knud started attending Danish school. At 20, he barely managed to graduate high school, with no ambitions for an academic career. But he burned with a fierce desire to return to Greenland and explore the Inuit way of life. These two men from utterly different worlds crossed paths, and soon Erichsen caught the polar fever that gripped so many young adventurers of the era. The North called to them like a siren, an unknown, uncharted land where you could roam freely, naming rivers, bays, and mountains after yourself. It was a place to encounter Inuit tribes that had never seen Europeans, to test your mettle against the harshest elements. Returning home, you'd be hailed as a national hero. In those days, anything Arctic was wildly popular. Polar explorers like Nansen, Amundsen, and Sverdrup dominated newspaper headlines. They were erasing blank spots on the map, mingling with royalty, and earning widespread admiration and respect. So, it's no wonder the romantic Erichsen fell under the North spell so easily. And so, Milius-Erichsen and Knud Rasmussen decided to mount their own expedition to Greenland. Their main goal, as they later wrote, was to visit new people, meaning the Greenlandic Inuit tribes that remained largely unstudied. As a child, Knud had heard legends of tribes living far north, almost untouched by outsiders except for a handful of whalers. No one knew their traditions, their folklore, or even if they truly existed. This mystery of uncontacted Inuit peoples lured polar explorers like a forbidden treasure. Securing permission for a Greenland expedition wasn't easy. Greenland was a closed country, requiring special approval from the Danish government. Plus, only the Royal Greenland Trading Company was allowed to trade with the Inuit. But eventually, the hurdles were cleared, and the necessary permits came through. Officially, Knud Rasmussen became the expedition leader, with Erichsen as his deputy. Joining them was the Greenlandic Inuit Jorgen Bronlund, Knud's childhood friend, who would serve as the translator since he knew many local dialects. Also on board was the artist Count Harold Moltke. Moltke had experience from an 1898 expedition to Disco Bay and an 1899 to 1900 trip to Iceland sent by the Danish Meteorological Institute to study the Northern Lights. He was more of a creative type, but with some polar know-how under his belt. Finally, in 1902, all the funds were raised, and in July, the expedition set sail from Copenhagen to the town of Gotthab, where Jørgen Brønlund joined the group. From there, they headed north to winter in Knud Rasmussen's hometown, Jakobshavn. The Danes in Jakobshavn warned that the expedition would never cross the Melville Bay Ridge and tried to talk them out of this dangerous idea. The group celebrated Christmas in Greenland. Their Christmas tree was a makeshift stand of sticks with bunches of heather tied to it, but a roasted goose and rice porridge on the table brought back the holiday cheer. In February 1903, the expedition on dog sleds left Jakobshavn and headed to Upernavik, accompanied by 2 Inuit, Gabba and Elias. They managed to cross the ridge that locals had warned them about so fiercely. Along the way, they stopped overnight at Knud's uncle, Carl Fleischer. He gifted them dogs that joined Knud's team. A few days later, they arrived at another uncle of Knud's, Rasmus Fleischer, who lived in Umanak. Here, they spent some time during which Knud collected local Inuit legends, and Moltke sketched portraits of the local storytellers. Soon, they continued north and reached Upernavik, which translates from Greenlandic as the place of spring. Upernavik was then the northernmost colony in Greenland. Beyond lay no civilization, though even in these Greenlandic settlements it was conditional. Here they began preparing for the last and most dangerous part of the journey. A dozen sleds headed north and laid out provisions at selected spots along the route. Such food caches were needed first to avoid hauling too heavy a load on the sleds, and second in case the expedition ran into trouble. If they had to trek back on foot, starving, these depots could save their lives. And these caches would still play a role, not just for this expedition. On March 1st, the expedition left Upernavik. Ahead lay 600 kilometers across Melville Bay to Cape York, and no European had ever made such a journey before. Most contacts with Greenland happened by sea. Whaling ships and, less often, research vessels docked at the shore, explored a small patch of land, perhaps traded with Inuit and sailed away again. So what lay inland in this vast territory was unknown. There might well be uncontacted Inuit tribes there. Plus, Rasmussen and Erichsen's expedition moved along the coastline, compiling a detailed map of it, and that was a crucial task. Knud Rasmussen, as an experienced musher, led the way. He faced the tough job of blazing a trail on the ice that the others could follow. He built giant sleds called omniums. Each day, they covered as much ground as the dogs and people could endure. In the evening, they unloaded the heavy baggage and set up a small canvas tent. Then they returned to the previous campsite and fetched the baggage that couldn't fit in the first haul. Once all items were gathered in one place, they set up camp, lit the Primus stove, and heated cans. Steak a la mode, ham with brown cabbage, and other delicacies. Then they crawled into sleeping bags, smoked pipes, and filled diaries. Moltke sketched in his albums to capture all his numerous impressions. It was April, light almost around the clock, but temperatures dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Along the way, Moltke fell seriously ill, likely from exhaustion after the grueling marches. His baggage was distributed among the other sleds, and he himself was laid on the narwhal and transported. Some provisions were left at ice depots to lighten the load and reach Cape York faster. When they finally reached the huts at Cape York, where there was an Inuit settlement, they found them abandoned. The Inuit pointed north, and they were in a dire situation. A sick member in the group, provisions nearly gone, and the Inuit settlement they counted on to replenish food stocks deserted. The residents had gone somewhere. Then they decided to send Knud Rasmussen and Jørgen Brønlund to follow the tracks until they found people. Milius-Erichsen stayed with the weakened Moltke. Knud promised to return for them as quickly as possible. Thus, the expedition split into 2 parts. Before leaving, they hoisted the Danish flag on the snow and declared the coast from Upernavik to Cape York Danish territory. After several days of the toughest trek, Knud Rasmussen and Jørgen Brønlund spotted a small dark spot in the distance. Despite hunger and fatigue, They quickened their pace and soon saw a sled with two people, a man and a woman. The man, dressed in a fox fur coat and bearskin pants, jumped off the sled and leaped with joy, waving a long whip. He shouted, "White people are coming to us." This man was named Maine Sengor. Nud Rasmussen told the Inuit that they had two more comrades, one of whom was ill, and they hurried to the Inuit settlement, which was a couple of hours away. There, they caused a big stir. The sleds were surrounded by curious locals, and the expedition members were welcomed with open arms. The Inuit shared their food, seal meat, walrus blubber, and helped nurse Maltka back to health. Nud immersed himself in their culture, recording myths, songs, and customs that had never been documented by Europeans. Maltka painted portraits, capturing the faces and daily life of these remote people. Erichsen, once back on his feet, joined in the observations, his poetic soul stirred by the raw beauty and harshness of the Arctic. They spent months living among the Inuit, learning survival skills like igloo building and harpoon hunting, forging bonds that went beyond mere research. It was a transformative time, but the expedition's goals were met. They had visited new people, mapping not just land but a vanishing way of life. As summer waned, they prepared to head south. The return journey was arduous, with thinning ice and relentless blizzards testing their limits. Dogs grew weary, supplies dwindled, but the knowledge they carried, detailed maps, ethnographic notes, and artifacts, made every hardship worthwhile. They arrived back in Denmark as heroes, their findings published to acclaim. But this success planted seeds for future ambitions, ones that would lead to unimaginable tragedy. Fast forward to 1906, Erichsen, now hooked on the North's allure, organized a grander expedition, the Danish Greenland Expedition. Funded by the Carlsberg Foundation and backed by the Danish government, it aimed to map Greenland's northeast coast, resolve the mystery of Peary Channel, was it a channel or a fjord, and assert Danish claims against American ones. The team sailed on the ship Danmark, with Erichsen as leader. Key members included Acton Friis as artist, Niels Peter Hooghagen as cartographer, and Jorgen Bronlund again as interpreter and musher. They also had Breer Koch, a young explorer eager to prove himself. The ship reached Greenland's east coast, battling pack ice that nearly crushed it. They established a base at Danmark Fjord, wintering in harsh conditions where temperatures plunged to -40 degrees Celsius. Cabins were built from ship materials, and they hunted musk oxen and seals to supplement rations. The long polar night brought isolation's mental toll. Cabin fever set in, with arguments flaring over trivialities. Erichsen's poetry helped morale. He'd recite verses by lantern light, evoking home's warmth amid the frozen void. Spring brought action. They split into teams for sledge journeys. Erichsen's group, himself, Hagen, and Bronlund, pushed northwest, aiming for Peary Land. Koch led another team south, mapping successfully. Erichsen's party endured blizzards that buried tents, frostbite gnawing at extremities, and dogs collapsing from exhaustion. They discovered new fjords, naming them after Danish royalty, but rations ran low. Scurvy loomed as vitamin C dwindled. Gums bled, joints ached. On May 29, 1907, Erichsen's team unexpectedly met Koch's returning group. Koch proudly announced they'd completed their mapping. The Greenland coast was now charted. Erichsen was stunned. They'd ventured into a 200 kilometers fjord facing southwest, thinking it was Independence Fjord discovered by Peary, but it was a new one. They named it Danmark Fjord. Erichsen felt deflated, his ambitions overshadowed. Late spring brought melting ice, complicating travel. Erichsen, refusing to return empty-handed, decided to press north despite risks. Koch warned of open water traps, but Erichsen persisted. The groups parted, Koch south to the ship, Erichsen north into the unknown. Koch's team reached the mountain ridge but found no passable route over it with sleds. It meant potential winter entrapment and likely death. By thin ice on June 23, 1907, after 88 days, they returned to the ship, reuniting with comrades. They burned their filthy clothes, bathed, donned clean attire, and feasted on home-cooked meals. Days turned to weeks, No sign of Erichsen's team. Summer's open water made sea ice impassable. Rescue waited until autumn's freeze. On September 22nd, ice solidified, and a rescue party led by Gustav Thost, an expert musher familiar with the North Coast, set out. With them, Johansson and Lindhard. To the mountain ridge, depots remained untouched. Erichsen's group hadn't passed. Dogs couldn't endure the long march. Searches yielded nothing. Several dogs died en route, devoured by survivors. Returning to base in late October, they wintered in Danmark Fjord, still hoping. Winter planned another search, but hope faded. They might find bodies and diaries with scientific breakthroughs and maps. The Peary Channel riddle lingered. Channel or fjord? Could America claim these lands? In spring 1908, Koch and Tobias Gabrielsen searched again. Reaching the Lambertland depot, they found 2 food crates, a kerosene canister, and clothing stack missing. Nearby, a snow-covered cave entrance. Inside, Jorgen Bronlund's body, beside a loaded rifle, Primus stove, and 2 provision crates. In one, a paper scrap with Hoag Hagen's map sketch and Bronlund's diary, mostly in Greenlandic, 1 page in Danish. I perished in the 79th fjord during an attempt to return home over the ice in November. I arrived here in faint moonlight and could not go further due to frostbitten feet and darkness. The others' bodies you'll find in the middle of the fjord before B.R. Hagen died November 15th, and Milius about 10 days later. Signed, Jen Bronlund. Koch searched for bodies but found none. Descriptions vague, snow thick. They covered Bronlund's body with boards and clothes, sealing the cave with snow. Koch bid farewell. Goodbye, Bronlund, you were a good friend to us. Returning to base, what happened? Erichsen's team, after parting, headed west to Independence Fjord's inland glacier at Cape. Reaching it, they raised the flag and built a stone cairn. But now, trapped in Arctic summer thaws, provisions low, sleds too heavy for dogs on soggy ground, they decided to summer in Danmark Fjord, hoping for musk ox hunts. But hunting failed. Only September 12th could they leave, starving, weakened. We don't know their route back to the ship, but not the agreed coastal path. Depots untouched. From Bronlund's diaries. Dire state for starving dogs pulling last sled, worn boots, polar night beginning, no knowledge of the land. No European had been there. They needed Lambertland Depot for food, clothing, fuel, where comrades would search. Near the depot in Lambertland, Milius-Erichsen and Hoag Hagen couldn't go on. They collapsed on snow mere kilometers from salvation. Bronlund reached the depot, dying likely from exhaustion and gangrenous frostbitten feet. Why did Bronlund know Hagen's exact death date but approximate Erichsen's? Perhaps after Hagen's death, Bronlund left to hunt or find the depot, returning to find Erichsen dead. Or he abandoned the dying Erichsen to seek rescue alone. In 1908, Koch and Gabrielsen returned to the ship with grim news. Danmark docked in Copenhagen August 23, 1908, flag half-mast. Participants received silver merit medals and 1,000 Danish kroner honorarium. Erichsen's widow got lifelong 1,800 kroner annual pension. At 1908 Copenhagen Maritime and Commercial Court hearing, Koch explained no body searches due to deep snow and vague Bronlund note. Society buzzed with rumors and myths. Some press accused poor, haphazard preparation. Erichsen blamed for foolish, reckless actions killing men for ambitions. From Alaska expedition explorer Einar Mikkelsen commented accusations. Knowing Koch well, he'd continue searches if any hope. On Erichsen, I know something about Milius-Erichsen. I can well imagine that he, being ambitious, felt disappointment comparing Koch's work to his own. We also know he changed his mind meeting Koch, and likely the other's splendid result pushed him. That's what later can be characterized as stupidity. However, anyone with explorers' and pioneers' blood is drawn by fierce desire to achieve more, and more than others. It's almost impossible to restrain. What would I do? I'd probably act like Milius. The lost polar explorers sparked search expeditions seeking bodies and crucially diaries with scientific discoveries and maps. Still unclear. Peary Channel a channel? Could America claim these lands? Einar Mikkelsen's expedition sought them. Its story incredibly dramatic, perhaps more than this. But I'll tell it next. It's filmed. Like to release faster. To end, Danish poet's verse for Jorgen Bronlund. Like a finger, alone, conquering fate, you met your death in the icy night. The edge of the world, measuring it, you knew its measure. If you enjoyed this story, definitely like this video. Comment what you think about this expedition and of course subscribe. I know many watch without subscribing. Please subscribe. It's easy for you, nice for me. Bye everyone.